an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Veronica Mars, Season 3, Episode 10, Show Me the Monkey. In this episode, there is an adorable new face in town. And I'm afraid that because he's going to be Mac's boyfriend, we aren't going to see him that much. And I just want him to, be around because he's so cute. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Arielle for commissioning this episode and commissioning the live watch for this episode, which I did earlier tonight. It's very rare that somebody commissions a live watch 2 episodes in a row. And it's also pretty rare to get a episode recording for the same day of the live watch. So all kinds of special things happening here, and I'm all about it because I really like getting to talk about it right after watching it, especially if I don't tend to try and rewatch episodes that often unless there's a long time between a live watch and the recording. So yeah, it just helps me out in every way. And I wonder because there's a lot this episode that I had strong reactions to. And I'm wondering what it was that made Arielle feel like she wanted this to be a live watch. Is it the ending? Is it her and Logan getting together again? Because don't like it. You guys know. I don't have to go through this all again. Oh, Rachel's in the chat. Hi, Rachel. Rachel says maybe the adorable monkey, if only. The adorable monkey, I really wasn't sure, you guys, how much I was going to care about the monkey when I saw it, because I get creeped out by monkeys sometimes. They look like little old men, and I find that can go either way, being either endearing and adorable or just very kind of disturbing. It's that uncanny valley, of a thing that looks a little bit too much like a person, but it isn't, but it's got hands, but this is a cute ass monkey. Adorable. And I think that probably my focus should be on the murder investigation, because the police are all ruling the Dean's murder as a suicide. He left a note that said, "Goodbye, cruel world." And everybody just thought that was a normal thing to do. I would love a pie chart of what type of suicide notes people leave. How many people, I know some people don't leave notes at all, but let's say they do. How many people get really specific about how they're feeling and what is motivating them to do this? How many people are kind of vague and just I just can't take it. I don't want to do this. And how many people do something like this where it's goodbye cruel world is a cliche, but I have to say it's such a cliche that I feel like it has to come from somewhere. You know how that is, where it's is this something that was in Shakespeare? And because there's so many things that I'm just what is that even? And then you find out Shakespeare wrote it and we all just decided that was great and we would just do that from now on. So I wonder about something like Goodbye, Cruel World. Oh, the humanity, that's we know where that's from. But the fact that nobody thought that was odd, and honestly, the fact that his wife didn't bring that up specifically when she goes and talks to Keith too. Once I heard that, I was that is such a ridiculous note to leave. I can't believe everybody's not talking about that part of it. I don't know how public that information even is, so maybe that's... But his wife would know. But yeah, the murder thing has taken a back seat in my brain. Mostly because, as much as I enjoyed the Dean, I don't care that much that he's dead. It's not going to bother me too much. And I think that's like probably going to be what's rough about the rest of the season. Splitting it into 2 mysteries is already, you're starting to be like wobbly. But then having one of the people who's killed somebody that you don't really have that much emotional attachment to, that's also rough. Like, what if they killed Piz? I mean, I don't want Piz to die, but he's somebody that we've started to really like, and that would be a fucking shock, wouldn't it? Or Logan. Ooh, let's kill Logan. Can we do that? That's a good mystery. I'd like that. And there could be all kinds of people that are potentially like on the table for that. Logan's got not only like enemies, but he's like a celebrity child. So there's that aspect as well. And then I don't have to see him and Veronica interacting at all anymore. I think this is a slam dunk. I'm really curious, you guys. If any of you watched this while it was airing, what was the public reaction to this reuniting of these 2 characters? Like, did other people feel about the 2 of them the way that I did, where they were just kind of over it? Or were they glad? And how many people didn't want the 2 of them to get together purely because they were interested in Piz being involved now? Because for me, and I'm like, keep in mind, I'm turning 36 next week, so I'm getting up into the cynical old lady area. But these 2 don't need to be dating anybody. It makes sense why they are each getting like pushed to do it. But, and it's one of those things that like, I don't have a lot of experience with what it's like for other people to insist that you like be involved in relationships. I was never pressured as a young girl or a young woman to get married or have children. That wasn't really something that my family like constantly shoved down my throat. My friends didn't seem to give a shit one way or another if I was involved with somebody. So I went through periods where I was single. I had casual boyfriends here and there, and I had a pretty serious boyfriend all throughout high school, and then very, very like spotty and inconsistent and casual in college until I met Ruben, my fiance, and I basically since then have been in a relationship with somebody like with no break practically. So there's a part of me that immediately reacts to this like, well, I have been in relationships a ton, so I guess but then I think about that period in my life and in college, and I'm like, oh no, not really. Like, I could have been on the receiving end of this sort of insistence, but I really wasn't. And I don't know what to make of that, if that's just something that, you know, is being exaggerated for the sake of the show, or if you guys were ever kind of talked to the way that these 2 are by each of their friends. Oh, that's unexpected. Rachel says, if I recall, the fandom in general loved Logan and hated Piz. Hated. I didn't mind Piz, but I did love Logan. Emily says, I'm not sure about the fandom, but I wasn't watching for the romance of it all, so I didn't care who she was with either way at this point in the show. There you go, girl. And Rachel says, I feel like love Logan and Veronica. Oh, fuck, that's their shipper name. I didn't even think about that. Is one of the original fandom ships. Shit. I don't see Piz being hateable. I could see him being a little annoying. I find him pretty endearing because he seems not actively harmful, which so many of the dudes in this show seem actively harmful. So in that respect, he's an outlier and I can just be like, fine. But the fact that people hated him, that really surprises me because I feel like he was like practically built in a box to be the likable new guy. And I think that's part of what kind of irritates me a little bit about him. And I'm trying to sort of like let that not influence me. But it really is like the writers wanted to introduce another potential love interest for her. And they made him almost in some ways as like inoffensive as possible just to get there with somebody that they thought everyone would like. And it has seemed to have the opposite effect, I guess. Rachel says, I think people were just like, who is this new kid? Get him out of here. I will mention Piz ever being around when we don't have Wallace in the episode. I have a problem with that. I don't like that Wallace has been sidelined in favor of Piz. And it doesn't make sense that that's happened because Wallace isn't a love interest. So it doesn't feel like he has to be out of here for Piz to be able to be part of the show. But I just don't, I mean, does Wallace show up at all this episode? I feel like I don't see him once, right? Emily says, I remember people hating him. People liked the damaged guy. And Rachel says, it could be my memory is skewed about it all. It has been a minute. And I don't think so about Wallace. Yeah. I think that's also a questionable choice on the part of the show is to like, you know, I was saying how a lot of the problem with putting her in a new environment at the school is the dilution of people that we knew and liked being involved still. And Wallace is like one of the OGs, and I don't really know why the show doesn't utilize him more. It feels like they didn't know what to do with him or didn't like feel like he could like hold his own in a storyline. I don't know. And it's not like he doesn't have any storylines, but they're very rare and spread out. He's just not around the way that I kind of expected him to be. And you know, I have mixed feelings because the way that they managed to have him be around in the high school setting was to have him be sort of like Veronica's sidekick lapdog dude who does all of this like dirty work for her. And she very much takes that for granted. So I didn't love that, but I guess I just expected there to be some continuation of that for some reason. And they just didn't. So I'm surprised. But anyway, okay. So let's start off with the opening of the episode, which is Veronica and her father quipping. And then the dean's wife comes in. And if you guys want to help me with names, I will appreciate it. I don't remember her name. I don't remember the dean's name. I don't remember the guy who's the professor she's having an affair with's name. I got nothing. There was a storyline involving Mac and Wallace, but it was dropped. I remember seeing deleted scenes on the DVDs. Now see, and those two are great. I would really like seeing the two of them specifically together. Mindy and Cyrus. Huh. That does not feel like it suits either one of them, but okay. So she is coming to him because she is pretty sure that her husband did not kill himself. And Keith is responding as though she is only saying this. Well, he asks why. And she says very honestly, truthfully, it's about money. My husband, as a suicide, we don't get any life insurance. And I have 2 kids and I'm all by myself now. I need help. And he sort of like seems to think she is riddled with guilt that her husband killed himself due to her affair. And she's trying to deny the reason behind his suicide in order to make herself feel less culpable in his death. Which, honestly, I don't know why that like didn't occur to me that he would see it that way. I was surprised that he sort of put up a fight on this, but because he says something when she tries to say, I don't think he killed himself. I knew him. I was really surprised that he says, I don't know. I was with him beforehand and he was really despondent and drinking heavily. And I was like, I mean, he was drinking heavily. despondent feels like the wrong word. And I just didn't get that energy from him at all. And it seemed weird that Keith did, because he's pretty good at reading people. But for the purposes of the script, he needs to not quite believe her and then be convinced and brought around, right? Odell is their last name, and then Professor Landry. Right. Landry. So he agrees to poke around, and he says, essentially, if I find anything that seems suspicious, then I will take the case. And he winds up finding something suspicious. First of all, he goes and talks to Weevil, and Weevil explains, like, I thought the dude, had just passed out at his desk, drunk, and then I saw the fucking blood. And he says the goodbye cruel world because his head maybe got stuck on the Z, which I don't remember. Veronica says something later about how this is the exact setup for the perfect murder paper that she wrote. And I don't remember if she says if the Z is part of that or not. But I'm not sure that matters, but it might just be a detail, but I just found it sort of, there's something sinister about Z's, which normally mean like sleep, to then be in the context of somebody who's killed themselves. It's just kind of like, ugh. And he goes and looks at the liquor trolley that he has in his office, which is this Mad Men? Is that something that's allowed anymore? Can you be the dean of a college and just have a liquor trolley in your office loaded up? Like, it just doesn't feel like something that would be allowed. But, far be it from me. And maybe if you're the dean, you can just do whatever the fuck you want, because who's going to say shit to you? And he notices that the bottle that the dean had been talking about saving for, one, like a celebratory moment in his life is unopened. And to him, that's kind of like the real red flag, is if you're going to kill yourself in the same room as a bottle of booze that you've been looking forward to for, like, who knows how long he's owned this bottle, but it's been years at least, and maybe decades. You're gonna crack that bottle open before you pull the trigger. You just would. Now, when I say that, I'm saying that as Keith. Keith really believes that's the deciding factor. Personally, as somebody who suffers from mental illness and, depression and occasional suicidal ideation, things that you were looking forward to don't matter to you when you reach the point where you want to kill yourself. Like, that's kind of the point, is that it doesn't motivate you. It doesn't feel like something to look forward to or care about. So it doesn't hold the same water for me. But again, for the script, we have to go with it, and it's fine. So that is really the first thing. And he tries this bit where he goes to a bar and sits next to Professor Landry. And when he sits down, I got immediate vibes that Landry knew who he was. I was just like, Veronica is kind of his star pupil. He had to have, heard of her dad in the context of what's been going on in the town. I forgot all about how Keith wrote a book, by the way, which gets mentioned, because that's how he recognizes him, he says. And her being a star pupil wouldn't ordinarily be a thing, but I feel like it would have to come up that her father was an investigator and he would want to know about him. I would, if I were a professor and I found out that, somebody's kid was really good at this because they helped, and I would want to know about them. So Keith does this thing where he really lays it on thick, trying to ask this guy whether he's done anything crazy for love, basically. And he tells a story about Molotov cocktailing some dude's car, but by accident torching his own, which I assume is made up entirely. Seems to me. And Landry is basically like, dude, what are you doing? No, I didn't kill the guy. And I'm not going to just talk to you in this bar and you're not smooth. Knock it off. And honestly, I was kind of here for it. Like, I don't believe that Landry killed the dean at all. I feel like he is an easy suspect, but it doesn't really make any sense. I don't get the feeling that they're like, he's here drinking in a way that feels like a man who's bummed out. So it could be that him and Mindy are broken up now because, I mean, it's got to be pretty hard to continue an affair that seems like it triggered a suicide without there being so much baggage that it's not hot anymore, unless you actually have feelings for each other. And there really didn't feel like there was like any sort of emotional connection coming from Mindy. Whether there was with Landry, I don't know. He seems more cut up about the two of them not being together than her. But it doesn't feel like enough for him to do something like that. Especially considering now that the news is out there, there's no real telling who is aware of the affair. So it would be very foolish to shoot the dean if there's a possibility that everyone's going to look at you first as a suspect because of the affair. And that brings up the question, who could have known about the affair other than Veronica and her father? Because that like would sort of open things up a little bit for me. I don't know if it would actually matter, but they may be trying to actively frame Professor Landry. We'll have to wait and see how that all shakes out. But I assume somebody else maybe knew. I mean, and whether or not Landry knew that somebody had specifically investigated them and found out, rather than, you know, somehow the dean just stumbles upon the information or trails her to the hotel or something, you know. And all of this to say that a key component of what the fuck went down is what the fuck happened in that hotel room after he showed up. Because we have him showing up, knocking on the door. His wife answers, looks like really flipped out. He steps inside. We saw him bring the gun with him. So he had it on him. And that would have made me think maybe somebody like got it off him and forced him back to his office. But we see him at his office, just like chilling. And I have no idea what could happen between him showing up and talking to them and him being at his office again that would make him want to go back to his office at all. Like for me, if I found out that Owen was cheating on me and I worked in a separate place, I think I would kick Owen out because he's the one who fucked up. I'm not going to leave. And she's already at a hotel. Fucking stay there. You don't come home. So him going back to his office is like already sort of a weird choice for me. And this is part of why I feel like it's his secretary. No motivation for it. I've got nothing in terms of any actual like hypothesis as to why she would do it. But I feel like him going back to his office doesn't really make that much sense unless the show wanted it to be somebody who was a workplace colleague that killed him. And that is part of why I feel like Landry's on the table at all. But he just seems too obvious. I just don't really buy it. So yeah, I'm talking in circles here. I'm sorry guys. But yeah, I've been sort of like trying to pick through what I know. And I just have this like weird block about how the show cut from him going into the hotel room to the office. And, you know, it might not even be that significant. I think that something happened between there, but it might not be because the show's done some weird cuts this season. You know, I mentioned in the last episode when Veronica's like by the window and then it cuts to her in the closet and it's very disorienting and it just wasn't done super well. So maybe that's all that was. I should mention too, last episode was called Spittin' Eggs. And apologies to whomever's listening who told me this. I don't remember if it was a tweet or what, but somebody said it was called that because that was what was on the dean's car. Because those Lilith chicks egged his car and spat on it. Which is just not a good enough justification for calling the whole episode Spittin' Eggs. It's just such a gross combo. And there's just so many things you could have called it. Why would you do that? I mean, so that's pretty much done between Keith and Mindy's deal here because he takes the case in the end, really believing that is the situation. So then we go to Max showing up, and she was called down for an IT issue. But when she walks in, the lab she's been called to is a wreck. Things have been knocked down, cages are open, and it turns out that somebody came in here and stole a bunch of their lab animals. And my immediate thought was animal rights activists, of course. And then she says it's those fat people. And I was like, all right, what is this? And then it turns out that they're, animal rights activists. But I was, for a second, I was just like, oh no, am I going to have to sit through like a horribly transphobic episode? Or transphobic, fatphobic. Sorry guys, I've got transphobia on the brain for some reason the past few days, J.K. Rowling. I don't know why. So Mac recommends Veronica. She comes upstairs with Gil and Pauline, who are the two scientists. I don't know if they're majoring in biology or what specifically, but they are giving her information about what happened, and she is pretty certain that it has to do with those people. And Veronica and Mac go and check out a info board on campus. Can we just have like a moment of silence for info boards? I know they still get used, but it's not the same now that there's an internet. It's not really the first thing people think of. If you're smart, you do both. You put up info on the board and you also post an event on Facebook or on the whatever, campus website or whatever. But man, it just really took me back to see it there. Like I just remembered all of the events that would go on at school and like how cool some of them sounded and just wishing that I had time to do more. There was one thing that one of my classmates actually got involved in, and I still don't know how she made the time. But I went to Carnegie Mellon for my freshman year, and they're a sister school to MIT. They're really into math. Robotics is a big deal there. Architecture. And they have a yearly contest where you spend like the first whole semester building a extremely light, extremely aerodynamic, basically wheelbarrow. And you find a very small partner who can fit inside it, and you push it. And whoever wins this race, and there's a tiny steering wheel inside it. So the person inside is steering, they're actively participating. And you basically race. And it's like a big deal on the campus. People just do nothing but talk about it. And they keep their, the blueprints for the things super secret, or they build them in like spaces that people aren't allowed into, and they're given like special keys and stuff by staff so that nobody can like fuck with it. It's serious. And it was one of those things I would see on this like board and just be like, oh man, that sounds so cool. So anyway, moment of silence for these boards. And we've got these people, the Hearst chapter of People for Humane Animal Treatment. Basically, this is like a PETA ripoff, but they are much less aggressive and horrifying than PETA. As a former PETA member, I can say that. I was vegan for 2 years and very aggressive about animal rights. And then I just started to realize how bad things were for human beings. And no offense, animals, but that started to be less of a priority in a lot of ways, and I just couldn't keep it up. And also my veganism like went out the window when I went to Guatemala and lived there for several months, because there's just no way to get by as a vegan in Guatemala. Not happening, kids. So anyway, they go there in order to try and infiltrate. And Veronica is attempting to do the whole like, oh, do you think that maybe somebody could, have, because this meeting starts off with Mac making a comment about how it smells like clove cigarettes and no like showers or something. And this gets the attention of this dude who's standing near the door. And she's like, oh, no, not you. You're fine. And he asks, have you been to one of these before? And I kind of was like, is he just trying to find a come on or what? And it turns out, no, he's leading the meeting. So that's why he's asking, because he knows that he doesn't recognize them, But this dude, what is his name? It's like Braden or Bronson or Brandon. Bronson, says Emily. Thank you. This dude, I cannot tell you guys how much my type this dude would have been when I was their age. There was a kid in my class who looked almost exactly like him that I was obsessed with. Obsessed with. Do you hear me? Like, it was not okay. And him and I kind of like, it looked like we might hook up. And we never actually kissed. We held hands, which I was not used to things going in that order when I was in college or high school. Like, you made out and that got you to the place where you would walk around holding hands. We held hands first, which for some reason to me meant more. And then he just sort of stopped really talking to me. And I couldn't get over it. It was just like this thing. So I see this kid and I'm just like, oh my God, he looks exactly like Will. And he is adorable, you guys. Super charming. He has this like smile that's like goofy, but just shy of dorky. It's still very charming. The eyebrows, I think, are a major factor for me. And there's just a warmth about his personality that really feels like they cast well for somebody who was going to be an environmentalist and animal rights activist. He just feels right for that sort of thing. And he's interested in Mac. And he makes it pretty obvious that he's interested in Mac. And Mac is having a really hard time getting over having been played and abused by what's his fucking face, who I hate that whole thing. So Beaver, thank you, Rachel, even though I really hate that so much. What's his real name? Because he got mad about that after a point. Cassidy, that's it, thank you. I mean, Cassidy sucks too, to be honest. I don't know. I can't help you, Beav. So this is when Veronica's like, oh, you're going to do a letter writing thing. Do you guys ever do anything more active than that? Because I heard that somebody broke into and it's a super unsubtle move, but everybody is still fooled because later on she's like talking to this girl and she says something like, I know you try and be careful with new recruits, but I'm ready. And the girl says, good to know, and gets up and leaves. And I really thought that was going to be her being like, yeah, I can tell you're fishing. I'm not an idiot. Bye. And I was a little disappointed to find that she was a little bit of an idiot. She has to be for things to work, But nevertheless, I was like cheering for her initially. And then she comes back with Trent from Daria. And I was like, oh, never mind. So yeah, this whole like storyline with tracking down this stolen monkey and stolen lab rats also is intertwined with Max dealing with getting close to somebody again. And part of the backdrop of that is this really like, it's this weird floor-wide or perhaps building-wide party that they're throwing where everybody's dorm room is a different country, like choose a country and people can mingle and go from room to room. It's one of those things that to me sounds really like tedious as a grown-up, but I think at that age I would have been all about it. Because there's nothing I love like a fucking party. I love hosting. And you give me a theme on top of it. I don't even have to come up with a theme myself. You just give me one. Forget it. That's it. My room would have been a legend after something like this. It would have been ridiculous. I would have spent too much money. I would have gone too far. I would have gone too far. I always go too far. Just a little. And in this episode, they go a little bit too far. It's really a tough thing because like, when you do something like this, it's really like the smartest way to handle it is tell people to represent countries they are descended from so that it feels a little bit less just like appropriation or racism or stereotypes or whatever. But that's not how it worked here. And I just kind of cringed a couple times. I was like, oh God. And this is when, because Mac and Veronica are both super not interested in participating in this whole thing. Mac has her hang-ups from what happened with Beaver. Veronica has just come out of her long-time relationship with Logan. But Parker is all about it. And she's deeply frustrated that these two aren't, considering that all three of them are single. And she was raped recently, and she feels like it doesn't make a lot of sense that she'd be so ready to like hop back on board. And as much as I like understood that, I just never really was a person who got aggressive about my friends dating either. I was talking earlier about my experience of being on the receiving end of this, and I really wasn't. And I never really cared if my friends were with someone if they didn't express dissatisfaction with their own situation. It wasn't something that was on my mind really, you know. Some people it's just like, well, they're just single. It's fine. Who cares? And it feels more like she just wants to get out there, and she feels like she needs them to do it too in order to like feel less weird about it. And I'm just kind of like, you know, just let them do what they're going to do and you do what you want to do. You know, it's just go ahead. I don't understand this needing to be so much a group activity. But the whole, like, the way this goes down is that they finally agree that they're going to host, they're going to be Canada. And they just tape a picture of a moose to the wall and play Bare Naked Ladies, which honestly, I found that to be a pretty solid joke. That moose taped up on the wall is really good. This whole thing is just so sad. And this is all in an oh my God. Emily says they also had accents. Allegedly. But I honestly can't think, like, if you're not going to try and do anything with like indigenous culture, which I would avoid, I don't really know what I would do for Canada if I were going to try and be like representing them. What does that even look like? You know, like, you could just do something about cold weather, I guess. And you could maybe do a French accent because, you know, Montreal, Quebec, I guess. Rachel says maple leaves hockey. Oh my God. Emily says serve Canadian bacon. That is some low level shit. Have those fries with the gravy, poutine. Oh, I've never had poutine. I hear it's really good. I mean, you really can't go too wrong with getting a potato product and putting a gravy and cheese on it. That's not really ever going to be a problem for me personally. So anyway, they host this in an effort really to get Bronson to come by. Veronica really steps in because Bronson's being very overt about being interested in Mac, and she's just not really knowing how to handle it. And so Veronica's the one who kind of is like, hey, how about you come to our room where we're having a party? Mac would like that kind of thing. So he comes by, they have a moment, and it seems like they're connecting, but then he tries to kiss her, and she kind of freaks out. I have to say personally that when he tries to kiss her, I was a little bit surprised because it felt like they hadn't been like hanging out that long, and it seemed a bit soon. But I also admired the swag a little bit and was sort of like, oh, all right, well, he's got some confidence in him, doesn't he? And when she pulls away, he seems to feel like he really misinterpreted the situation. And he tries to be cool, but you can see he's a little hurt and confused by it. So Veronica steals his license. Is that what happens? And they use this as like an excuse to go and see him wherever he lives. Parker stole it. Oh, I didn't realize that. For some reason, that makes it funnier. Because Veronica, that's just a thing she would do. But Parker doing that is a little bit bonkers. And when they show up, there's this girl. And I immediately was like, that has to be his sister. Because they do look just enough alike. And there is like a casual familiarity with the way he's behaving with her. And he just tried to kiss Mac. There's no reason for him to not be embarrassed if there's some girl here and Mac is also here. This is clearly a guy who's got some integrity, and he isn't going to be like there. He is somebody that I believe would have shame were he to be caught with some girl in his place when Mac shows up. So the fact that he was a super chill, I was like, yeah, this isn't what anybody thinks. And I really appreciated that that's nipped in the bud fairly quick. It doesn't go on for too long. Mac, for her part, is like uncomfortable enough initially before she knows that she like makes an excuse to go to the bathroom or the kitchen to get some water. And she passes by Bronson's room, and there's all these rat cages in there. And she lets Veronica know, who checks on it. And then Veronica comes back, and in a pretty like non-confrontational way, honestly, it's just like, oh my God, why didn't you tell me? I see that you have the rats. And I was like, that's actually a good way to handle it. Behave as if like you're sort of in on it and you don't disapprove at all. And you wonder why they wouldn't just tell you. And he says somebody just dropped them off on his front steps. She says something about, where's the monkey? And he's like, I don't know. I don't have it. I don't know where these came from. They just showed up. And he says that they were in a box. And she asks to see the box. And there's a bunch of shredded paper in there. Shredded glossies from porn mags. This is the one part that I just really do not get whose idea this was. Nobody that age is shredding their porn. They're just not doing it, kids. There's no reason when newspaper exists, when probably lots of like printed and now obsolete data from your experiments exists on regular paper. He's not going to shred his porn. Do you know how expensive a porn magazine is? Like, I don't know about nowadays, but I remember when I was like a teen, I was curious about like, oh, I guess I like could pass as old enough to buy one of these. I wonder how much it is. They were like $11 and $12. It's like the price of a book. Isn't that just... Oh, Emily says, I think it was less porn and more like Maxim. okay, I guess. That still seems like suspect to me, but okay. That's acceptable. The ladies were scantily clad, not naked. True. But yeah, this is what makes her think that it's a guy that probably did this. And, you know, that's a bit heteronormative. But I really wonder, actually, now that I say that, whether many, like, gay or bi women were into Maxim. Because it's such, like, a male-dominated magazine, and it shows beautiful women. But other than that, I have to imagine, probably not super appealing. But what do I know? And she's like, when she gets the news from Mac about the hard drive, because somebody dumped something on it in order to fritz it, Mac pulls it apart and finds a bunch of leaves inside. And it turns out that they are tea leaves, which leads her back to the scientist who's very snotty, this Asian girl who just like stomps in at one point and like snarks a bit and then stomps out. And she is a botanist, or at least she's studying plants right now. So Rebecca, God, I do that so much with these two. It's weird. Veronica seems to think that might be what the leaves are, is something from like one of the things she's studying or experimenting with. And, Arielle says, I thought it was more just he needed something to shred for the box, and this was probably the closest thing to grab, and he was done with them. Yeah, it's more the like that he was done with them thing that I'm just, I'm just thinking about my high school boyfriend, and he held on to Maxims, and he held on to FHM. Is that the other one? He had back issues of those years old. He didn't get rid of anything. But that might just have been a weird thing he did. And I sort of like, for some reason, decided that was just what guys did, you know? So this girl sees the leaves that Veronica brings in and is immediately like, oh, this is green tea. And shows her the canister full of it that's over at like their little coffee, like drink station. To which I have to ask, who's just leaving tea leaves in their tea that they're drinking and dumping it out? But I guess he maybe didn't even brew it to drink. He could have just brewed it in order to use it for this. And so he didn't care. And that is when she notices the little toy squeezy banana. And the girl notices her noticing. And it's like, oh yeah, I took that away from 25 because I got really sick of the noise. And on the weekends, I just couldn't focus. So I keep it here. And very specifically, the lab partner had said, like earlier in the episode, we don't name the animals. We don't buy them squeaky toys. We don't do anything like that. They're not pets. So the fact that somebody gave this guy a squeaky toy is significant to her. And this girl having taken it away from the monkey and not really seeming to give a shit, it doesn't seem like it was her. And that leaves the other two, one of whom is a woman, so she really feels like it's this dude. And the next scene is her hanging out outside of his apartment, and she can hear the monkey running around inside. So he shows up and he tries to be like, what? What? I don't know what you're talking about. And she's like, dude, cut the shit. I can fucking hear it. What's going on? And when she goes inside, this monkey is the cutest thing that's ever lived. It is like, sits in his lap and like tucks its head in the crook of his arm. It sits on the back of his shoulders and like puts its little like front paws over his head and like just kind of pulls at his hair. And the main thing that I couldn't stop thinking about is like, how do you relax when there's a creature that's this small and agile that can just climb shit? Like, it's bad enough with a toddler, but they can't really climb easily. They can climb. Certainly I've seen it, but it's not like a monkey that can just ascend a thing and suddenly be on the top and you're like, what happened? I couldn't do it. My anxiety would be out of control with this, you guys. But this monkey is so adorable. Even the rats were cute. I think rats are so cute. Not city rats. City rats, sometimes they're cute, but they're a different beast. But those little lab rats were pretty adorable. And he explains to her how he would get in this routine where he would give 25 the squeezy toy during like a shift, and then he would take it away before he left for the day. And one day he forgot, and he's about to leave without taking it, and 25 sticks his arm through the bars with the banana to give it to him. He knew he was heading out, and just that moment of like this awareness from this animal that's like learning and adapting and intelligent, it's too much for him. He's like, I can't do this, because what happens at the end of every one of these labs is that they euthanize the animal and do an autopsy. And the one lab partner is very clinical about it. And it's just like, man, this is how we learn things. This is how medical breakthroughs are made. Like, this is how we have discovered cures to diseases and potentially to more. It's like just how it works. And it seems like he's somebody who tried to do that, and this moment just really sort of unraveled it. And he says to Veronica, the reason that we don't name them is because part of being able to do this job is needing to shut your compassion off. You need to make yourself not feel anything. And he's like, I don't know if I want to do that. And it's harder to kill something that has a name. And this is one of those like situations where I do see both sides. I see the side of feeling like we can like make medical breakthroughs and improve life for humanity. But I also don't really know that we deserve that, to be honest. Like, why do we get to just poke and prod and torture and kill animals in order to make things better for ourselves? And that's one of those like things where it's easy for me to say that, not like being directly tied to somebody who is suffering from something that they're studying at the moment. So I might feel differently, you know, if I were in a position where I felt like I was depending emotionally on a cure for something being found. But this, like, I really appreciated this as a foil to FAT, the People for the Humane something animal treatment. Not even like they weren't presented as particularly like bonkers or anything. It wasn't they could have made them the kind of caricatures that the feminists of earlier this season were. And they didn't do that because this boy had to be appealing. And so they couldn't have him be the head of a group of like rabid nutcases, you know? But nevertheless, this guy is more of like the grounded, like specific example person who's like, I thought that I understood the point of this, but when it came down to a specific situation for me with an animal that I had gotten to know and who had clearly gotten to know me in return, that was just, it changed things for me. And I really liked that, you know. I forgot to mention, it doesn't really matter, which is probably why I forgot to mention it, but there's this whole thing with Veronica trying to get on the inside of this like splinter group within the Fat Society, but it turns out to not actually be a splinter group. It's basically the main group, but they have like a little trial thing that they sort of put you through if you act like you are interested in becoming more involved. And in order to prove herself, she and Mac and Parker all go to this like Ted Nugent-esque kind of concert and trick this dude into putting on a Meat is Murder sweatshirt because he doesn't read it. And he just puts it on thinking that it's the same as all the ones they're wearing because they are very cute sorority girls. And in what I think is a pretty accurate display of how much dudes don't pay attention to anything else when there are three very cute girls in the room sort of throwing themselves at a guy. He just puts that shit on and doesn't even think twice about it and says meat when he looks at the camera without really even seeming to wonder why they would say that. It's totally believable, to be honest. And when I was watching this live, I paused and said something about, I believe it was Ted Cruz, who he was like doing a photo op with some college kids, and they wanted to hold up a sign and get their photo taken with him. And he didn't look at the sign, and they held it up and it was a Beto sign, and they got the photo, and he never like noticed that they weren't even holding up like a Ted Cruz sign. So yeah, that just reminded me of that. And this sort of gets them in the door, and this leads to them being like brought to like a secret like project where they have to pose naked with these no fur signs. And then it turns out this is all a big prank, which honestly was pretty good. I really thought that was funny. I especially think it's funny that one dude did take a photo just to make it all the more believable that this is something they're working on, that he did this. I thought that was actually pretty good. I liked that. I didn't know what was, I thought it was going to be just like some Splinter Cell had done something really drastic. But yeah, so that is, that's the moment in which Veronica convinces Bronson to come to their room for this like around the world party thing. I'm trying to think because I feel like there's something, obviously the relationship thing. So the whole thing with Mac and Bronson was just, I was so invested in that when we went back to like Veronica, I was like, oh no, because she doesn't need to be in a relationship. She doesn't. I don't care about that. She's very interesting. She's very smart. And frankly, I feel with her interests and her drive, a relationship can only hold her back unless she is with somebody who is as much of a lunatic as she is. And Logan's not. Logan's pretty basic for somebody who has got so much trauma. And I just don't see him being able to deal with her any better now. Like, there's this sort of conversation between her and Piz where Piz is talking about, because earlier Parker was saying how she wanted to hook up with a guy, and they ask about Piz, and I had forgotten that was even like anything. And she says that she doesn't really know what his problem is, but he just doesn't seem that interested. And then he sits down with Veronica after he does this like radio bit and talks about how people like seem to think that just settling for anybody is better than nothing, when if you know what you want, there's no reason to just settle for anyone. Why would you do that? I 100% agree, but they clearly have very different understandings of what their conversation is about, because he gets very lit up as she begins to agree with him and thinks clearly that she is seeing him in a new light. I also thought this. And meanwhile, Logan is being just like dragged out to do stuff by Dick, who listen, guys, people have friends that aren't great. And I know this is just something that sometimes you have to deal with. I could not date a guy whose best friend was Dick. That's it. That's all. End of story. I meet his best friend, and Dick Casablancas is that best friend. That's all she wrote. There is no reason for Logan to be best friends with Dick, other than that the show felt they needed to keep another familiar character around. And I think that they're like sort of trying to act like it's comic relief when he's around, but he's so terrible that it's not funny. He's just awful. And everything about him and his involvement in anything he touches is so repellent and abusive and misogynist that there's nothing about him to me that makes it sense that he and Logan are friends anymore. It's one thing when you're in high school and you kind of have friends in high school that like, you're just friends and whether you like each other doesn't even matter anymore. You're stuck together in these classes. You're already in these social circles and that's sort of done. But once you get out of there, that's part of the beauty of leaving high school is that now the whole world is open and it doesn't have to be like that anymore. And I don't see what the hell is tying these two together at all anymore. It just doesn't make any sense. Anyway, Arielle says, hard agree. Rachel says, I think the other appeal of Dick for Logan is that he doesn't care who Logan's dad is, which is clearly a huge issue for him. True. I mean, I feel like there's gotta be more people out there that also wouldn't care, but I don't really like, it's the sort of thing that after being burned by that fucking journalist, I guess I could see how that's not really going to be something he's eager to explore. Emily says Logan literally has no one else at this point. But Dick is utter trash. Yeah. Yeah, this is the thing is when people say like, I don't have anybody else. And I have been in a place where I just didn't have like close friends. And I just sort of didn't have close friends. It's hard for me. I am okay with being by myself, I think, enough that choosing to be with somebody this sort of toxic is something that I just don't really understand. I'd rather be by myself. And Logan just isn't like that, I guess. Arielle says, also rich people's brains are rotten in a way us poors can't understand why they do some of the things they do. That's also maybe part of it is that they're both super wealthy. And that, well, is Dick anymore? I don't even remember what wound up happening with his whole thing with his dad and the money laundering. But I could see if you're somebody with a ton of money wanting to hang out with other people who also have money because you just don't know who's taking advantage of you or just wanting to be friends with you due to that. But nevertheless, it's just, if anything, I would like for this to be a conversation with Veronica because he actively like antagonizes her in a way that I just can't accept a boyfriend being accepting of, it's just, they just don't work together. So anyway, he hooks up with this girl and she makes a big deal about who his dad is. And it's really clear after he's done it that he just doesn't know what the fuck that even was. Like, he's just sitting there like, what did I just do? Ugh, this is gross. And Veronica has this conversation with Piz, and then somebody's knocking at Logan's door, and it's her, and she jumps on him. And the next day, the two of them are together again, and Piz is devastated. And I felt for him. I really did. And when she sees him get up and leave, it seems like it's occurring to her for the first time that he's interested in her. Like, it never entered her head. And I just don't buy that. So, like, in life, somebody like Veronica would be used to people having crushes. And I'm certain that the way that he was talking to her, she would have figured that out. She's not an idiot. Half of her job is like reading people and picking up social cues and subtext and, but like I said, as much as I felt bad for him, I don't care about the two of them hooking up either. I just want her to I don't care about romance that much. And Mac and Bronson were so cute and adorable that I just felt like, okay, we're done. We did it. Perfect. Leave it alone. And then they just had to with this. Emily says, I didn't feel bad for Piz because I think he likes the idea of Veronica more than Veronica. I do like Piz though. I can't comment on that. I don't really know. Rachel says, I think she knew deep down, but didn't realize how hurt he would be. Maybe. Yeah. Maybe it's his reaction, the strength of it that she didn't expect. But yeah, so that's the end of the episode is basically her and Logan having patched things up. And I was just like, because really the main thing is they're acting as if they each couldn't like be happy with anybody else, but it doesn't feel like much time has passed. And I just don't feel like anything about their actual issues with each other has been dealt with at all. So that's just gonna come up again because that's how that shit works. But anyway, so I'm going to wrap up. I'm over time. Thank you guys so much for listening. And thank you again to Arielle for commissioning this episode and commissioning the live watch, which was really fun. And I appreciate all of y'all in the chat being so active and helping me with names and stuff. I really do like to hear other perspectives on this show because I know a lot of you, like, this was a show that you watched while it was airing. So you have a very different relationship with it than somebody commissioning something that's like up on Netflix right now, you know? So I just find that interesting to hear what you thought about it back in the day. So anyway, okay. Thank you guys again. And I will be seeing you soon. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.